The Tennis Gambling Podcast and the Sports Game Podcast Network is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. You can win it 200 times your money with Underdog Fantasy. Pick 'em. Sign up with the promo code SGPN to claim your special pick and a first-time deposit offer of $250 in bonus cash. Underdog Fantasy, promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by the Mega Memorial Day merch sale. 15% off everything in the SGPN merch store with the promo code SGPNMay. And welcome, everybody, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast here on the Sports Game Podcast Network. It's currently early Monday morning on May 20th, roughly 1 a.m. Eastern Time. I'm your host, as always, Scott Reichel, once again going solo for this pod. Should be a bit of a longer episode because we do have two tournaments to preview. It is the final set of tournaments before the French Open. So we have two separate clay 250s. So we're going to preview Geneva and Lyon. So we're going to cover each of those tournaments. We do have quarter odds for these two events. So once again, going to be a bit more thorough with the outrights in a little while. Before we get into any of that, though, do want to remind me once again to like, subscribe on YouTube. Also a reminder to rate and review the podcast on Spotify or Apple. Also a reminder to check out the merch store on the SGPN website for Tennis Gambling Podcast merch. We have shirts, we have sweatshirts, a lot of high-quality merchandise, so check out the merch store, not just for this show, but also for any of the other podcasts you might listen to, because, for example, it is a big overall week for racing. You have the Indy 500, you have the Monaco Grand Prix, and the Coke 600. Rod and Cody from the NASCAR Gambling Podcast and the F1 Gambling Podcast have you covered. Make sure to join their Kyle Larson diecast car giveaway. That's free to enter. Just go to sportsgamepodcast.com/race to register and make sure to subscribe to the NASCAR Gambling Podcast and the F1 Gambling Podcast. Plus, there's also a very fun sale that we got going for Memorial Day. We have a Mega Memorial Day merch sale, 15% off everything in the merch store. Promo code SGPNMay. So if you want to buy, for example, a Tennis Gambling Podcast shirt, if you want to buy an NBA Gambling Podcast shirt, a lot of different options for podcasts of the network that you can support. So check out the merch store and use the promotion before it ends up expiring. Either way, though, time to get into the actual recap of the final that we ended up seeing in the Italian Open on Sunday. Unfortunately for the lock and dog picks, not good, as Zverev was fantastic. Simply put, Jarry, based on how well Zverev served, was still competitive. So the match was definitely close in general, but unfortunately Zverev served too well. So Jarry could not win a set, and that was our lock. Didn't work out as the sets were competitive, but Zverev eventually found a break late in the sets and held on to win in straight sets. And our dog, I still love the play, didn't get there, as Zverev did not have the most double faults at plus 175. However, I believe it was tied 0-0 at 6-4, 4-4. So it was still in the balance late. And then Jarry unfortunately double faulted on back-to-back points. Then Zverev double faulted on the next game. But Zverev did win the double fault battle 1-2. So don't regret the play there. Unfortunately, Zverev did serve too well. Have to go into the actual details regarding the serving because I know Jarry's not a great returner, but that really wasn't his fault. Zverev, for reference, landed 80% of his first serves. 80% of them went in, and he won 95% of his first serves. 95%. So he looked like a mixture between Isner, Karlovic, and Sampras. But anytime you serve 80% and you end up winning 95% of the first serve points, you're not going to lose. And we saw Zverev win. Jarry was fine for the most part, did win 78% of the first serve points. So that was kind of the angle that we had there for him to win a set. Thought the serve would definitely be successful, and it was. The issue was Zverev really never fell off serving. And in fact, Jarry never really threatened. I think he had a 15-30, maybe once or twice, but Zverev never faced a break point. So that was really the story of the match. Zverev just served very well. It was one of the best serving performances I've seen in a while. And as a result, Jarry did end up losing as Zverev ended up lifting another Masters 1000 title. So picked up a loss there with the lock and dog. Zverev served too well. He had an out-of-body experience with the serve, and we picked up a loss in both the lock and dog picks. So hopefully we'll end up bouncing back here for the Monday lock and dog at the end of the show. Reminder of the actual format. We're going to preview both tournaments with quarters, then the outrights. Then we'll do it for the other event. Then we'll go to a break, and then we'll end up taking a second to go through the lock and dog picks for the actual matches of the first or second round for these events. Either way, though, time to get into the actual preview of the tournament. So we're going to start off with Lyon. Lyon does start half an hour before Geneva does, so that's why we're going to cover Lyon first. And going through the recent winners, you had Fees, who ended up beating Cerundolo in the final. I remember he had a crazy match against Nakashima. I think it was in the semis, and Fees got that done in, I think, a third set breaker. But either way, Thies ended up having a very nice run to win his first ever ATP title, I believe. You saw Norrie beat Mulcahy in the year before that. You ended up seeing Tsitsipas beat Norrie. So Norrie's been good in the past, but it's not really relevant for the sake of this event because Norrie's not here. Now, for the actual quarter picks, to go through the odds for this event, starting off with the first quarter, you have Humbert at plus 175. A reminder, though, shop around. You can find other books with quarter odds, so try to find the best price you can. Humbert plus 175 as the home country guy. You have Echeverry at 210. You have Kepfer at 4-1. You have Seabold Wild at 5-1. You have Martinez at 650. Now, at first glance, I think that Humbert should be the favorite. His draw is pretty favorable as he has a bye, then a matchup against either Kempfer or a lucky loser. The bottom half of that quarter, though, is Murderer's Row because you have Seabold Wild against Martinez in the first round, which is not easy at all for either guy. And then the winner's going to face off against Echeverry most likely because Echeverry is a qualifier. So those three guys might kill each other, and all that Humbert has to do is accept the bye and beat Kepfer, and he's already into the quarterfinals. I think 175 is a great price. So that's why I'm going to go with Humbert. I did find a 187, so that's going to be my pick for the first quarter. I would have taken a flyer or somebody else, but unfortunately, with the ease of his schedule compared to the other guys, I just had to go Humbert by himself, and I'll let the other guys kill each other in the same region. I'm moving on to the second quarter. You have a pretty open overall quarter based on the prices because you have Darderi as the favorite at plus 250. You have Munar as the favorite at plus 310. You have Tiafoe at 450. Rinderknech at 6-1. You have Manarino at 650. Daniel at 8-1. And Evans at 10-1. So I find it interesting that Munar and Tiafoe are the second and third lowest odds to win the quarter when they play against each other in the first round. Now, Tiafoe has been terrible. He went to challengers. He still sucked. So I expect Munar to win that match if I had to guess just based on the current form. But I don't think there's any value on those guys either because I think that match could be competitive. And I do think that anytime you have a difficult match on paper in the first round, and then you have to win a couple rounds after that, it's a lot to ask for if you're going to be taking a quarter pick with a player. So the idea of Tiafoe or Munar winning, which is not an easy match, then facing off against Evans or Rinderknech, they should beat whoever's in the other quarter, the other section there. But the point is, it's not exactly the easiest path for both guys. Instead, give me Darderi. Darderi has a matchup against Daniel. He's about a minus 300 favorite in the first round. Then Manarino is on the bye, and I decided early on I was going to blindly fade Manarino. You know, I love his overall game on hard court and on grass. He's a really bad clay player. So with Manarino being a lost cause on clay, I don't think home country advantage is going to matter. I think Manarino is going to get killed in the second round match whenever he ends up playing against either Darderi or Daniel. But give me Darderi at plus 250. I think it's a good price. He's won an ATP title already on clay this year. He's a very solid clay player. Even gave Zverev a bit of a run for his money. I know he lost in straight sets. There was a breaker in there in the last tournament, but we ended up seeing Zverev win the entire event. So the fact that he was able to force one set to a breaker and he was able to hang in there for a little while, at least against Zverev, I think is pretty impressive. And I think that any way you slice it, Darderi is a pretty solid clay player. So give me him at plus 250. I like those odds quite a bit. And I do think the quarter is pretty favorable to him based on draw, since he can face off against Manarino in the second round, who's basically a bye at this point, and you can let Munar and Tiafoe, the 2 and 3 odds guys, kill each other into the first round. Moving on to the third quarter, you have a much shorter favorite as you end up having Cerundolo at plus 140. A reminder, he did lose in the final last year, so there was a bit of a revenge tour here. Monfils is at 4-1. Sonego is 5-1. Gaston is 6-1. Galan's 8-1. You have Pericard, or Perichard, however you want to pronounce it, at 9-1, and Nishioka at 12-1. Now, for this one, Sonego's the appealing long shot, but he's been atrocious so far this season. But if you want to go for a relatively weak quarter, which this is, maybe Sonego can find some overall form, and maybe he can just be able to put together a good showing. Decent drawing for him. In theory, would have to face off against Monfils in the round of 16. Monfils been bad too, so I'm not sure if that actually matters. But I'm not going to take Sonego. I don't trust him, but I am throwing it out there. If you did want a potential long shot, I don't mind the 5-1 on Sonego, but I can't trust him, and I'd rather not spend my money that way. I am going to go Cerundolo at plus 140. At the end of the day, I just think that he is the best player in this field on clay. He is the defending runner-up. So he clearly cares about the event, and I do think that he's going to be motivated to finish some unfinished business that was left over from last year. Very weak quarter, though. Monfils been kind of a mess. Sonego been a mess. Gaston's been terrible. Galan has not been good. Pericard has been mostly a challenger level player, and Nishioka's had some injuries he had to deal with, but he's not a great clay player either. Very weak quarter. Give me Cerundolo at plus 140. Moving on to the last quarter, we only have 4 names because I believe that a couple of matches that started in the fourth quarter on Sunday. Starting off with the favorite, you have a pretty sizable long shot as the favorite. You have Kotov at plus 225. You have Moore at plus 225. Bublik at 250, and you have Vukic at plus 350. Find it interesting that the 2 favorites in the quarter are playing each other in the first round, but it makes sense, I guess, because Vukic and Bublik are not good on clay. Now, Kotov, I do think is a solid clay player, but Moore's been in pretty good form recently, and he's going to be in his home country if you want to factor in the home country advantage. But I do think looking at the overall form of Moore, he might be appealing in the spot. I know that he has been a pretty streaky player for a while, usually bad, I'll admit that, but he has been pretty good over the last couple of weeks at this point. He ended up making a respectable run in Rome, as he was able to beat the likes of Nava, ended up beating Albert, beat Fuchsovics in 3, beat Fies in straight sets, beat Rublev in 3 sets, and then lost to Jari. So he made a pretty good showing, and then ended up beating Gasquet in the first match here in Lyon. So I think he's actually in decent form, and I think that looking at the overall price here, I know Kotov is going to be a tough opponent for Moore, but I think plus 225 is a good price, so I'm going to go with him as the home country guy to win his quarter at plus 225. That's going to do it, though, for the actual outrights for the quarters. Apologies, I only had 1 name for each quarter. Went relatively chalky because the chalk prices for the group favorites or the quarter favorites are pretty, I'd say, generous. And you have none of the guys in this entire event who are minus to win the quarter, which is always a good sign. Now, as for the actual outright picks, I am going to read the odds for the actual tournament winner. So starting off with the favorite, you have Cerundolo at 5-1. A reminder, the odds do fluctuate depending on book. Humbert is at 650. Echeverry 650. Darderi is 8-1. Monfils is 12-1. Munar is 14-1. Mueller is 16-1. Thibault Wild 16-1. Tiafoe is 18-1. Bublik's 18-1. Sonego's 20-1. Martinez 20-1. And Gaston is 20-1. I'm not going to name any other names. I really don't see anybody else really making that much of a threat. You can argue that Kotov might. I find it pretty interesting, though, that the quarter odds are the same for Mueller and for Kotov. And yet Kotov is about $9 more expensive than Mueller to win the tournament, which I find weird. Mueller's at 16-1, and Kotov's at 25-1. So I find those odds fascinating. If you want to just talk about the lack of consistency between markets with the sports books, but I think for this one, I am going to stick with relative chalk. However, I'm not going to take Cerundolo. Now, I know Cerundolo is defending runner-up. I mentioned a second ago he's got unfinished business. I don't trust him enough to be the favorite to win an event. Now, I understand his draw is favorable. I understand he's got the game to definitely beat anybody in this field. I've seen Cerundolo get in his own head too many times, and I've seen him short-circuit too often. So I don't trust him. If he ends up in some really, really tough spots, I think that mentally he might implode. We've seen that before. Don't want to bother. I'm going to pass on Cerundolo. I am going to pick him to win the quarter, as I don't want to say a hedge to make sure that I get something out of his tournament. But I do think that Cerundolo can easily make the quarter and then fall apart in the semis of the final. So I'm not going to go with him at 5-1. I kind of want that price to be a bit higher. That'll take me into my first pick, though. I am going to go with Humbert at 650. Will admit, though, he has not been in the most phenomenal form recently. Pretty decent clay player, but it's his home country. He's been in solid form so far this year as a whole. And I do think that around looking at the best price available, you can find 650. I think it's a good price. So give me Humbert at 650. Moving on to the next pick I'm going to have for the event. I am going to go with another quarter winner that I have. Give me Darderi at 8-1. Mentioned before, the draw is quite favorable, but I did find 9-1. So give me the 9-1 instead. I think it's a good draw. And I think that he's definitely capable of doing it. He won't be intimidated because he already has won a clay title this year on the ATP level. But I think he's a very solid player. And no shame to him for losing his Zverev in straight sets, who eventually won the entire tournament. And I think he only dropped 1 set along the way. So he was in great form, and Darderi gave him at least 1 set of difficulty. Good enough for me. Give me Darderi at 9-1. And for the last pick, it's pretty interesting because I do think the draw is pretty weak. And even though I actually did not mention this guy to win the quarter. But I do think that there's some value on Munar. Now, the problem is Munar's in the same quarter as Darderi, so one of these guys are going to have to lose before the semis. But I think the odds are okay at 14-1. Now, Tiafoe's been a mess, so I think Munar should win that match on clay. But the path is not bad to the semis because you're facing off against Tiafoe, and then you're going down the line. There's really not many guys that scare you. You're looking at the likes of either Manarino or not Manarino. Rinder, Knitsch, or Evans, and I don't think either guy's that great on clay. But you're looking at the favorite in this quarter being, or I should say the highest seeded guy in this quarter being a plus 650. The point is it's up for grabs. And if I'm going to pick anybody that I think can make a dream run, even though I do not really like Munar that much based on sometimes his attitude and the grunting is a real pain in the ass. But he's a solid clay player, and it's a pretty weak quarter. I don't mind him at 14-1. That's going to wrap it up, though. If you want a super long shot, I know it goes against my Mueller option, but I think Kotov at 25-1 is a bit large. Either way, that's going to do it for the actual preview of the outrights for Lyon. Now it's time for Geneva. However, before we continue that, do want to remind you once again that we are brought to you by Nordic Fantasy, because Nordic Fantasy is the easiest place to play fantasy sports, and they definitely want to make the NBA playoffs more interesting. Playing their pick'em game is a simple selecting higher or lower on player stats like points, rebounds, assists, and so much more. If you had Michael Porter Jr. lowers on Sunday, you had a good time. If you had Ant point lowers, you had yourself a hell of a time as well. Mix and match your favorite sports. Does not have to be just basketball, and you can win up to 100 times your money, and it's a ton of fun. Arms available in 30 plus states, including California, Texas, and even Canada. They also have a lot of great options for tennis. They have double faults, they have aces, breaks of serve, a lot of fun, unique angles to make tennis viewing more interesting. And on top of that, they also have a ton of great promotions. They bonus chance airdrops, specials, giveaways, and more to the playoffs. So make sure to follow Nordic Picks on Twitter to keep an eye out. Arms available in 30 plus states, including California, Texas, and Canada. They also just launched Champions, their player versus player format in Florida. So sign up with the promo code SGPN to claim your special pick and a first-time deposit offer of $250 in bonus cash on Nordic Fantasy. Promo code SGPN. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished going through Lyon. Now it's time to preview Geneva. So starting off with the recent winners in this event, we're going to go with, just to go list them out in order. Jari did win. He beat Dimitrov in the final last year. I believe we had Jari to win this event last year, and that came through. And we had him in the final. So Jari did us a solid in Geneva. But he beat Dimitrov. You saw Ruud beat Sousa, who I believe retired recently. And you saw Ruud, who beat Chapo. So Ruud has won 2 of the last 3, which I'll mention in a second because Ruud is actually here for this event. Now, to get into the quarter odds for these I should say the quarter picks for these different quarters. Starting off with the first quarter, not going to spend much time on this one. You have Djokovic, who is in the field, and of course he is a big favorite, minus 225. Griekspoor is 6-1. Chapo is 7-1. Hanfman's 11-1. Murray's 14-1. Fun little second round matchup potentially. You can get Djokovic against Murray in a turn the clock back, let's see who's a not watched battle. And I'm assuming Djokovic would win comfortably because Murray is a pretty, I don't want to say sizable dog, but he's like plus 120 against Hanfman or so. So they're expecting him to lose in the first round. Point is, though, Djokovic, I think, is easily the class here, and I'm not going to go against him. Yes, he did lose early in his last event, and I recognize that he has not been in good form. Whilst at the velo, struggled a bit early with the serve against Moutet. But he's the best player here. That's good enough for me. Minus 225, I think, is definitely not really worth the price. But I do think that he's going to win the quarter. So I guess I have to take him by default. Moving on to the second quarter. You have something a bit more open. You have Fritz at even money. You have Draper at 330. Goffin at 6-1. Makic at 9-1. Kovacevic at 10-1. Mickelson at 11-1. And Moreno at 12-1. I'm going to go with Fritz. Fritz has been in good form recently on clay, and I do think that he's the best player in this overall section. Draper, I think, is a solid clay player, but the issue is durability, and as a result, he kind of has a hard time chaining together great performances in a row. But Fritz did make a good run in Rome before eventually losing to Zverev in the semifinals, so he was very solid. Beat Dimitrov in 3, beat Corden in straight sets, beat Fognini in straight sets, ended up beating Cerundolo in 3 in Madrid, beat Hurkacz in Madrid as well. Been in very good form on clay. I like the even money. I think it's a good price, and I think that his draw is actually not that bad. To go through Fritz's draw for this event, he has a bye, then a matchup against either Kovacevic or Mickelson, which should be a pretty relatively free win. And then you end up having Goffin, Moreno, Makic, and Draper on the other side. Give me Fritz for a very easy draw at even money. Moving on to the third quarter, looking at the actual odds here, this will be the official Armageddon quarter where I'm picking chaos. You have Shelton as the favorite at plus 175. You have Morozin at 3-1. You have Kaboli at 5-1. Rusevori at 7-1. Giron at 8-1. Shevchenko at 8-1. And Karatsev at 10-1. Mentioned this before when I faded Shelton in the last event because I thought that the odds were a bit insane. He's very overvalued on clay. And I know that he won a clay title this year in Houston, which is not exactly the purest clay, let's put it that way. But at 175, I just don't trust him enough to actually get the job done on clay. So because of that, I think I am going to fade Shelton. He might get it done, but there are a couple of underrated clay players in this field. For example, I think that you're looking at, for a long shot, Giron, who was able to beat Rusevori coincidentally in 3 sets about a week prior. Pretty solid clay player, and I think that, for at least for an American, and I do think that there might be some value on him, but I think Kaboli might be worth a look at 5-1. I think that he's got a lot of firepower, and I do think that he can have some success here on the courts in Geneva. So for me, I am going to skip Shelton. Morozin I thought about, but he's a little bit too inconsistent for me, and I don't think he's in the greatest form right now. So instead, give me 2 long shots. I'm going to go with Kaboli at 5-1, and I am going to go with Giron at 8-1 as my picks for the third quarter. And last but not least for the quarters, we have a very, very talented quarter, probably the most talented quarter in the entire field. You have, at least I should say for the top end, it's the most talented because you have Ruud at 125 and you have Baez at plus 240. So I think the best 2 guys in that quarter are better than the best 2 guys combined in the other quarters, besides maybe whatever Djokovic is involved with. You get my point, though. There are really not many guys challenging, in my opinion, for the fourth quarter besides the top 2. You have Baena at 5-1, and Baez killed them in the one head-to-head clay meeting in the past. Offner's been terrible. He's at 8-1, and Chikata's not a good clay player. So I think this goes 2 ways. Give me Ruud minus 125, and give me Baez at 240. If one of them win, you make money, and I think that's a good deal. So give me those 2 as my picks for the fourth quarter. Now it's time for the outright picks for the actual winner of the event. So starting off with the odds, looking at the favorite, you have Djokovic at 140, you have Ruud at 310, Fritz at 750, Baez at 11-1, Shelton at 12-1, Morozin at 20-1, Draper at 22-1. You have Griekspoor at 22-1. You have Baena at 25-1. Shapo 25-1. You get the point. Now, I do think even though Djokovic is my favorite player of all time, there's no value on him here. I know he joined at the last minute, but the point is Djokovic is looking for his first title this year to try to build some confidence before the French Open. If he gets it done, would I be shocked? No, he's Djokovic. But I haven't really seen him look that impressive for a while. We saw him struggle a bit early on against Moutet. Then he flipped the switch and he dominated. But then he lost it to Bilo in straight sets. He got buried in that match. So I think Djokovic is a bit overvalued by the odds makers. And I do think that with him being in a 250 at the last minute, that does kind of tell me that he's not a fan of his current form and he's going to be trying to work at it. On one hand, that tells you he's going to care. On the other end, that tells you that he is currently in the middle of a downswing. And as a result, I think 140 might be a bit too cheap. So instead, I'm going to go with a player that totally pisses me off, but I like the price. Ruud at 333. Won the title here twice. I have to at least bring it up, so I know that he's definitely equipped to handle the clay courts. And he also just beat Djokovic a couple weeks ago on clay. So he finally exercised that demon, finally beat Djokovic, and I do think that can result in some, I'd say, added confidence if they face off in the latter stage of the event. For the other one, give me Fritz, who also has a hard time beating Djokovic, but I think his quarter is pretty favorable. So I'm going to go with him just based on talent and upside at 750, and that's basically it. That's going to wrap it up, though, for the actual outright picks for Geneva. Now it's time for the lock and dog picks for the show. Before we get into that, though, do remind you once again that we are brought to you by Rhythm. If you're betting on NBA player props, then you need to download Rhythm, because Rhythm gives you a menu of the best player props for every single NBA playoff game, making it easy to go through and find the best props to put your money on in seconds. Rhythm's predictions are backed by over 3 years of data and a team of data scientists and quants that focus on fine-tuning the algorithm to give you the best chance of winning. Rhythm pairs their predictions with player prop graphs to help you feel even more confident in your picks, which you can make wherever you normally place your bets or DFS plays. From bench players to starters, Rhythm has everything you need for player prop lines, all backed by AI data, without you needing to endlessly scroll a sportsbook. On top of that, they also allow you to create your own models for the NBA, so you can get AI-backed money line, spread, and total picks with every NBA game. And you're also looking at a free day trial. If you start a free 7-day trial and start winning, with the NBA with the NBA player props on Rhythm. It's available wherever you get your apps, and of course, Terrell and I, or Munaf and I, or really anybody, Lante as well, always do underdog lineups, and you can definitely use Rhythm to, I'd say, look over some of the picks that we end up potentially giving out for that section, or maybe even just player props for lock and dog. You get the point. Rhythm gives you more information. That's all you need to make yourself a better. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished going through the actual outrights for Geneva and Lyon. Now it's time for the lock and dog picks for the actual matches for these tournaments. Starting off with the lock, I am going to go with a two-pick parlay. Give me Darderi money line, parlayed with Draper money line at -108. Darderi's good on clay. He's won 5 of his last 7 clay matches, won a clay title this year already. And you're looking at Taro Daniel not being in good form. He's lost 4 of his last 7 clay matches. 2 of the 3 wins were in the challenging, or in the, I should say, the qualifying for this event. So Daniel against ATP level competition has been a mess on clay, and I think Darderi has the game to definitely beat him. So I think that he has some value at around -300 to throw in as the first leg of the parlay. Second leg is going to be Draper, mostly fading an injured Makic, who has not played since April 27th. So he's been a mess physically, and I think he's in line to struggle because Draper, we know, can make matches very physical, and I think that'll be able to keep the ball in play, maximize the actual length of the rallies, and I think that Makic might either showcase signs of rust, or he might just completely run out of gas. But the point is, Draper has won 4 of his last 6 clay matches as well, and the players he's lost to are pretty good. He lost to Medvedev, for example, lost to Hurkacz, losing to top-tier guys. So it seems like he takes care of business as a favorite most of the time, and as a result, I do think there's some value on this play to throw in with the Darderi play for the parlay. So once again, the lock's going to be on Darderi money line and Daniel money line at, Darderi money line and Draper money line at -108. For the dog, I am going to go back to All Reliable, a play we've given out multiple times this year, and it's cashed every single time. Bublik is playing against Vukic, and you know where we're going. We're going back to the podcast signature play. Give me the fade of Bublik in the first set. Give me Vukic first set money line at +106. I can't believe Bublik is favored in the first set. I understand on paper he's the better player. I understand that in theory he's the more talented guy. Bublik in the first set this year, as a reminder, because we gave it out a couple weeks ago and it won, and I had to update the stats. Bublik this year has played at 26 matches, so he's completed 26 first sets. Bublik is 6-20 in the first set. 6-20. He's laying in the first set in this matchup. Sign me up. I think that's a great deal. Bublik has also lost the first set in 7 straight matches. He does have the French Open up next, so he might punt this event, and maybe there's a chance he rolls over immediately and gets steamrolled, and Vukic wins in straight sets in about an hour and a half. It is possible. We've seen that before. Point is, though, Bublik losing 7 straight first sets and also losing the first set in 20 of his 26 matches this year tells me the odds are off here. Vukic already played a match, beat McDonald 6-2, 6-2 in the first round, so he should be accustomed to the clay, especially in this environment. But Bublik showing up right before the French Open means he definitely might be incentivized to punt if things go poorly early, and he has been an absolute mess in the first set all year long. So +106 is a good price. I'm going to take that as my dog. So once again, my picks for the tennis show, I'm going to go with a 2-pick parlay for the lock. Give me Darderi money line, parlay with Draper money line at -108 as my lock. For my dog, give me Vukic first set money line at +106. That's going to wrap it up for this episode. Find me on Twitter at Reichel Radio. Find me on the NBA show. Find me on the MLB show. Find me on the NFL show. Get the point. WNBA as well. Next episode will be the quarterfinals. We're going to take a couple days off before we get back into these 2 events in a couple days with the quarterfinals. So we're probably going to preview all 8 of those matches. At least that's what the plan will be. Until next time, though, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.